All right, we're calling to order this meeting of the Richfield Housing Redevelopment Authority. It's 7:07 PM on July 15th. Our first order of business is approval of the minutes for the June 17th meeting.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any corrections or discussions? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the June 17th, 2019 minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the minutes. Next is the approval of the agenda.
I move approval. Second.
Okay, are there any changes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approving the agenda. There is no consent agenda this evening, so we're going to move on to consideration of the approval of a resolution authorizing the sale of 6812 Emerson Lane and the approval of a contract for private development between the Housing and Redevelopment Authority and Andrus Custom Homes Incorporated for the construction of 5 single-family homes under the Richfield Rediscovered program. So this is a public hearing, but we'll start off with the staff presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Stark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight, as you mentioned, we are considering the sale of 6812 Emerson Lane and the approval of a contract for the sale of that property to Andrus Custom Homes. Andrus is applying to purchase and redevelop the property at 6812 Emerson Lane from the HRA. The builder is proposing to split the 1.3 acre lot into 5 separate lots, construct 5 new single-family homes, and extend Emerson Lane into the development. The homes would be based on the same split-level model with varying roof lines, siding patterns, and exterior colors. Each home would have 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and an attached 2-car garage, and would receive sound attenuation upgrades to mitigate the noise of nearby 35W. The estimated sale price for each home would be $349,900. The builder would begin marketing the homes following the HRA approval of the land sale. A public road would be constructed to provide access to the homes with a turnaround for emergency vehicles. In addition to the road extension, water, storm, and sanitary sewer mains would be extended to serve the new development. The builder has estimated the cost of completing the infrastructure improvements at $300,000. The builder would pay for and construct all of the public improvements. Given the high cost of preparing the site for development, the sale price for the property would be $1. Just a little bit of background, and I know we've talked about this one a number of times, so you're pretty familiar with it, but we did hold work sessions on November 13th of last year and April 15th of this year to review these proposals along with some other ideas. You know, staff over the years, we have owned this property for quite some time. Over the years, we have tried to market it to MnDOT for various purposes. We've talked to our Parks and Recreation Department. We've talked to various developers multiple times, and you know, there were always roadblocks and barriers to getting anything done. Finally, we did get this proposal from Mr. Andrus last year when we came to the work session. You know, there was some neighborhood concern about the impact of 5 homes and a desire to do fewer than 5. If you recall, you know, we'd gone through some fiscal analysis to show that, you know, with 5 homes, with a number of homes, and there's not a magic number, but there's a certain number of homes at which it doesn't make sense to have a private driveway anymore, especially without a traditional homeowners association. It was our estimation that that number was really 2. If it was more than 2 homes, a shared driveway was really difficult to manage. So the staff's recommendation was to either go with 2 homes with a shared driveway or 5 homes with a public road. And the reason, the way 5 was arrived at is, again, because of the extraordinary public improvement costs. That was the developer telling us how much cost he could bear in developing the property. At 4 homes, it didn't pencil out for the developer, and it would have required additional HRA subsidy. We've already subsidized this property quite a bit more than I would recommend adding to. So again, that's where we came to the conclusion that either 2 homes with a shared driveway or 5 homes with a public road seemed to be the most plausible. I think the general consensus from the HRA was that you understood that. Weren't necessarily crazy about it, but understood that that was the case. The neighbors, some of the neighbors have varying degrees of real estate and development experience, and they'd expressed an interest in taking a shot at it. And the HRA, I think, opened that up. We worked with the neighborhood, asked them to provide us some information about how they might develop it. I don't want to speak for them. We did get a response from them. I believe some of that's attached, but I think in the end they came up with the same conclusion that 2 houses, the sale price you'd have to attach those 2 houses to make this pencil out financially really exceeded what the market would bear, I think is the conclusion that the neighbors came to. And, it's a public hearing, so at some point in time, if that's not accurate, they'll maybe correct me. So with that, again, the neighbors withdrew their proposal for 2 homes. We went back to Mr. Endress and explored whether anything other than 5 would work for their organization, and they felt like it would not. And here we are at 5 homes again. We did get some follow-up questions from the neighborhood, and I wanted to address some of those, the questions. One of the questions is whether the homes, the neighborhood feels like they sit kind of high on the lot, and asked whether they could be lowered. The foundations, the footprint of the home could be lowered. The biggest problem with that is gravity, and the fact that the sanitary sewer needs to flow down where the sanitary sewer comes into the site. When the engineers figure out the amount of pitch that has to happen for every linear foot of sewer line, the houses are as low as they can possibly sit without having to do a sewer lift station. I don't know of anywhere we've ever done a sewer lift station for single-family homes. That's something you do. We put in a sewer lift station for the Best Buy corporate campus to give you an idea of the magnitude. I can't imagine us ever doing something like that for a few single-family homes. So the height really has to be that to accommodate the storm sewer. Having said that, staff doesn't feel that the height should be problematic. Again, you'll hear from the neighborhood and maybe hear what some of the concerns are with the height. To lower the buildings would also have some other impacts, would require a lot of retaining walls, would require all kinds of other things. There's also a question about stormwater runoff, and that whether it's this property on Emerson Lane or any property in the city, the engineering requirement is that all of the storm sewer runoff should either be able to be accommodated on site with holding ponds, with those kinds of things, or it's diverted to the public storm sewer system and can be accommodated in that way. So this project has gone through like a preliminary engineering review. If it progresses, it will go through a more robust engineering review, and they're going to do all those measurements to make sure that stormwater is not impacting neighbors. There's some concern about the design of the houses, the facades, and maybe I'll let Mr. Endress address that. But it was about the fronts of the houses. The way the houses are oriented, I believe the fronts of the houses are facing kind of interior to one another, and that really the neighbors are going to be seeing more of the backs of the houses. I don't know if that's more or less problematic, but that's the situation. I think that covers those. Also issues about privacy and privacy fencing. those kinds of things. This is a topic that comes up with every development project, is the privacy issue. I don't know that I have ever come up with an answer that on the front end has ever made neighboring property owners feel really comfortable. I do know that on the back end, we don't hear the concerns that we heard being forecast. These homes, Mr. Andrus, I believe, has built, 15 Richfield rediscovered homes in the community. These will be further from the previously existing homes than any that he's built to date. And we just haven't had those kinds of concerns from neighbors where he has built. So, that's kind of a rundown on some of the concerns we'd heard. With that, I would stand for any questions you might have.
Are there any additional questions before we start the public hearing? All right, Commissioner Vrees Daniels.
I just had a question. As part of the contract, it says Mr. Enders would have to find buyers by January 1st, right? And that survey work and other pre-construction related activities are options to do before that date. What are other pre-construction activities? Like what would happen to the land? Say if we get to January 1st and he hasn't found any buyers, would it be in the same state it is now, or would it be altered in any way?
It wouldn't be altered in any way that would impact our future ability to sell. He may be doing things like soil borings to determine whether the appropriate soils are there, or how water percolates into the particular type of soil. So I think the work he'd be doing beforehand would be environmental engineering work and survey work, and that wouldn't have any lasting impact.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? I had one, and looking over the agreement, it said that the HRA is responsible for removing any buildings that are there. Is it our intent that the buildings have already been removed and we're not worried about like where the foundation hole was or any of that stuff?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So I did have that discussion with Mr. Endrus like 5 minutes before the meeting started, and did clarify the buildings are gone. That is the intent of the language in the contract. The buildings are gone. There is some asphalt that's still there. There may be portions of foundations that are still there. That is something that the builder is taking on and has accommodated in their budget. So, I'll go back to the HRA legal counsel and make sure we're on the same page with how that's written. So if ultimately you approve the recommended action tonight, you might want to give a little leeway for the attorney to make modifications for that kind of thing.
All right, I just wanted to make sure it was in the public record what the intent was. Before we start the public hearing, there's a housekeeping issue. When we're in the council chambers, there's usually a place for someone to sign in because we ask people to give their name and address. Do we have a paper? I've got a pen here, but
Yeah, I think my
we
pen
just
is in the
need-
council chambers.
But
so-
we've got, I've got a pen, but okay. So while we're taking care of the housekeeping part of it, the way that a public hearing works is that each person is given 3 minutes that they can state what they would, or the points that they would like to bring out. It's not like a question and answer period. And then after that, we'll close the public hearing. And if there are questions that have come up, we can ask staff or the developer to answer them. So when you do come up, we just ask that you state your name and address for the record and write it on the piece of paper. And we'll have 3 minutes, and Commissioner Vrees Daniels has agreed to time for us since the timer's over in the other room as well. And each person gets 1 chance to speak, and we'll wait for the city manager to come back with the sign-in sheet, and then we'll go ahead.
While she's doing that, I'm going to try to track down a pen for myself.
Oh, you want this one? I have, here's an extra one. Here's an extra. I had 2. Well, I've got like scratch paper. Oh, do you have a question while we're waiting?
I did bring some of the things, if you want, if overheads would help, I don't know. people need it.
I don't know that I have that capability in this room to do overheads.
Oh, yeah, I suppose we'd have to,
Well, usually people have, that's
we
right.
could
they
pull
have
it up on the screen though, if the internet's working,
Oh, let me see.
because that's what they usually do. Like when we have Transportation Commission, they pull it up on the screen and
Yeah.
look at Google Earth and all kinds of stuff. You've got the whole packet. Looks like John's gonna be able to get it pulled up.
Clear, we need alternative systems. Turn the lights down a little bit on this.
Okay, just so if someone needs to see it, we've all read it. But,
It's hard to read it if you.
oh, the lights, okay. Close to it. Full disclosure, we're almost there.
Andrews brought Mark.
All right, thank you all for your patience. We're going to formally open the public hearing at this point. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? All right, sir, you can come up. You'll need to push the little oval on the front so the green light comes on, and please sign your name and address.
Is the timer started now?
There you go.
Was anyone here involved in this 14 years ago? You were? Were you, Pat? So just one person?
And can you state your name for the record,
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry. Chuck Strauch, 6601 Emerson. I was at the meeting, and I stood up and I mentioned it was not an economically feasible project at the time, and it was done anyway. There was a considerable amount of interest in the neighborhood from neighbors and other parties in purchasing the property, but they got overruled. So that brings us fast forward to today, And we have heard virtually no numbers from anybody. But from my investigation, the number right now today is $357,200 that the city is into this property for. That would be, and I had to estimate these because I'm not sure. Does anybody know how much property tax the city of Richfield gets on a dollar? If we pay $1 of property tax, how much comes back to the city?
It varies, but anywhere from 32 to 38%.
Okay, well, for sake of argument, I used 50%. At 5 lots, at $3,000 roughly per lot would be $15,000 a year, which would net Richfield $7,500 a year in property taxes. That would take, to recoup that, 47 and a half years, or to the year 2067, to bring us back to zero. Now, and I've heard virtually nobody's heard anything about the additional cost, any specifics. I would like to know the exact amount of how much more money the city is planning to put into this specifically. I mean, I think you're going to vote on this tonight, and I think it would be fair if everybody knew, especially the taxpayers here, knew how much they were going to spend on this property. Were you going to answer me on that?
2-minute warning.
Oh, 2-minute warning. I've only spent a minute, and I'm almost done. That's basically all I wanted to say. I actually wanted to say that I don't believe in the project. I think it's wasting money. Unfortunately, when in 5 years, when the police department has to come to the city coffers again because all of these properties are requiring more police and fire, we're going to all have to pay for it. I just think it would be better if you just left it alone and left this property alone, sold it to the neighbors, divvied it up, get some tax money back from it. But you're already down $350. You're going to be down another. It's got to cost, I don't know. Can anybody give me a figure what it's going to cost to do a road? And is the city going to pay for this? You know, this is a lot of money that we're putting out for a private business. And I honestly don't see, and I think you all have to answer, what's the upside to the city? What are we gaining? We're certainly not gaining anything financial. And so you gain 5 more houses. We gain 10 to 15 more cars on our dead-end street every day.
Okay, so
But,
your time has
am I
expired,
done?
but thank you so much.
Okay.
And we'll come back to questions at the end. I'm taking notes on what the questions
Okay,
are.
thanks.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? I'll give everybody an extra 30 seconds.
This is, green is good.
Yep, we
All
can hear
right.
you.
My name is Steve Archer. I'm at 6720 Emerson. I think we've been there for 33 years. We are very aware of the history of this particular parcel of land. And just to go back, back in 2005, at the time, there were 2 options that we came up with the city, and one was to sell to HRA, and also the other one was to sell to a neighbor, Chuck and Jan Banky. And, for some reason, the city put stipulations in there that made it next to impossible. And had we sold the property to the Banky family, we would not be here today redoing this, this many years later. Chuck took a lot of my thunder here, so I do have a few comments yet. One of them being the elevation, again, of the structures. These are 28 feet high homes. In my situation, I sit, 4 feet or so below my grade in my backyard. And these structures here are Well, I'm going to have a driveway, it looks like, coming in my backyard now that we're not real happy with, but still, the elevation of these homes just don't fit the character of our neighborhood, and I think we should keep that into consideration. You know, stepping back to 2005, 3 homes were also, at that time, the number of homes that we all kind of agreed upon. And I think we're still at that right now today. Not 5 homes, but 3 homes. I'd like you to consider that. As far as, what else here? Never done this before, folks.
You got about a minute left, so
Okay,
we got some
thanks.
time.
I guess I'm really concerned also with the condition of the land, with the trees that are dying, the trees that are sick. Will there be attention given to cleanup of the property? And who's going to pay for, such cleanup? Not just on the 6812 Emerson Lane parcel, but also adjacent to it. All the fallen trees, dead trees. It's a concern. That's about it.
All right, thank you for your
All right.
time.
Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else that wishes to speak?
Hello, I'm Jody Powell. We're at 6800 Emerson. Couple of thoughts. I know you guys can't answer any questions, so I'll try not to pose them as questions. But some of the terms for the development seem very favorable for the builder in a way that seems a little unfair or out of norm from normal business practices. So two of the one that I just noticed is he's got to have the purchase orders, and those are, I assume those are full purchase agreements from buyers, not anything that's other than a full contract, by December 31st, but there's nothing that he has to pay to hold the property till then. So typically, and I think a bond is the right word, but I'm probably saying that wrong, but typically, if you're putting a hold on the property while you figure out the development piece, you have to pay for that. And if you don't develop it, then that goes to the property owner. So it seems, and I know this, we're giving away the property, so you can't do a percentage of it because 50 cents probably really doesn't help. But I think that there should be something in place to hold the property until December 31st. And then I'm a little disappointed about the privacy fences and ideas being taken off the table, because when we were there last Wednesday, and Julie was there helping with the meeting, she made it sound like that was a consideration, whether that's a fence or vegetation. And she even asked if we'd be willing to put it on our property, which we are. And people don't come back afterwards, because what would be the point after it's all said and done? It probably doesn't pay to complain that they didn't get the privacy fences they were hoping for. And I think my biggest point really is that this property was purchased and has always been intended for 2 to 3 points, or 2 to 3 homes. So changing it to 5 seems to be the only reasons I'm hearing, because you said like it's how much cost the builder could bear and things like that. We're changing it to 5 to make sure that somebody can make money off of it, which I'm fine with making money. We all make money at our jobs, right? But nobody has said this is the best use of the property to slam 5 homes in there. It seems very unnatural. And since this is a very unique piece of property, I want to make sure we're just being really thoughtful about it. And just because we finally got a proposal after 15 years doesn't mean we have to take it. It doesn't mean it's the right way to use this property in a very unnatural way. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there someone else that would like to speak?
Hi, I'm Sandy Sween. I live on Oak Grove Boulevard. And I know there's lift stations in that area. There's several of them. There's one on Emerson, off 73rd, there's a lift station there for the homes that are down in that corner. And there's another one on Aldridge and Oak Grove Boulevard. So they are in Richfield and have been for 50 years or so. So maybe the height of the buildings could be changed. Also, environmentally, living in that bubble of right next to the freeway where all the pollution is going to come over and down, I don't think I would want children or grandchildren living there because of that amount of pollution. Maybe there's something with Wood Lake Nature Center that could be developed there, something where kids wouldn't be living there, where they could have some kind of a, I don't know, you have to talk to Wood Lake, but maybe there's some other use for that property, like she just said, that would be more beneficial because it can't be the best air situation for families. So, all right, I'm done. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. All right, is there someone else that would like to speak?
It won't cover the neighborhood. Thank you. My name is April Preem, and I live at 6639 Emerson Avenue South. And so my backyard isn't quite impacted by that, but my block is, of course. And my understanding is that one of the purposes of the HRA is to encourage investment in Richfield, and that one of the goals of the city is to encourage lifelong residency, which I think are great goals. But of course, as we mentioned, building 5 homes 15 feet from the highway barrier and at an elevation that's quite different than what exists there, it disrupts the landscape of the existing homes. I'm also quite concerned, especially with the year we've had, everyone's probably well aware of water problems, and they're a big issue on our block. But this would have a negative impact on how the long-term residents live in and feel about their properties. So I think it kind of goes against those objectives that we have. And I feel it would be better to encourage investment of the existing homes, quite a few that could use that, especially with the year we've had, as opposed to this sort of investment that really changes the landscape. Just a couple other comments. The height, again, it seems like a big issue. The water runoff, I know you've said in other situations it hasn't been a big deal, but we have water problems on our block. So I think it needs to be looked at closer. If there was some sort of option to have neighbors purchase that property, if it's only $1, you'd still get the property tax value out of it. And I don't stand to benefit from purchasing that land at $1. I'm on the other side of the block, but I would still support that. I think, and then again, Chuck's point I think is important to me as well. It's going to cost quite a bit of money to develop that. What would be passed on to us as residents? But that's pretty much all I have. And I appreciate you listening to us today.
All right, thank you, and thank you for signing in.
Sure. Do you want our addresses on this list too?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll have to get some. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is John Powell, and I reside at 6800 Emerson Lane. Thank you tonight for putting this together. I think I'm going to just say, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Okay, this property was purchased. I think that there's a common theme that people understand that it should not have been purchased for this development. Had there been more investigation done on this, we probably wouldn't be in the situation that we are now. That being said, we've had many of you out to the property, have invited all of you out to the property to walk it, to see it in person, to really get the full impact of what 5 homes is going to look like, feel like on this unique piece of property. A majority of the people that had walked the property admitted that 5 homes doesn't seem right on this piece of property. And, in good conscience, as you're making this decision tonight, I would like you to think about that. Think about the decision of what this impact is going to have on the surrounding neighborhood. Think about the impact that it's going to have when we really are looking at the city of Richfield. And this is a great town. It's an amazing city. And yes, do we want more people to live here? Absolutely. But 5 homes back here does not make sense. And, we've, as a neighborhood, have said that we're open to development. And we're not saying no development. We are open, obviously, to people making money. That's fine. But there has to be a different way to make this lot work from that perspective. That's a big decision that's in your guys' hands, right, in all of your hands right now. And I think that, we really are hoping that you can see what an impact this is going to have on a neighborhood where it's going to be a big change. From that, going back, we would like to also make sure that if this does end up moving forward, that we have a seat at the table as neighbors to be able to put in requests for how this is developed, okay? It's a unique piece of land, right? This is not what your normal everyday HRA piece of property for development, one home on a city block that's being taken down and a new home going up. This is a big development that's happening here. And so as the abutting neighbors and then the rest of the neighborhood should be able to have some say and input as to how this is going to be developed, not only from a landscaping standpoint, from a privacy standpoint, and from the housing standpoint. So I hope that you'll take that into consideration too as we're moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? All right. Then is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye. Aye. All right, then we need to answer a few questions, and then we'll proceed with discussing the actual motion. So can you talk about the costs to the city? I know that it was brought up that we've already invested quite a bit of money. Are there going to be additional costs? Can you go over that?
Sure. Thank you. So just kind of by way of background, I've been with the city since 1998. I was gone for a 2-year period in 2005 and 2006, and that's when this was purchased. So I don't have as much firsthand knowledge of the acquisition of this property as I might with some other things. I'm cobbling together what I can from the historical record. I can tell you that we have spent a lot of money on this property. We've spent $336,000 since 2005. That's on the acquisition of the home. That's on we've had to do a fair amount of tree work on the property, just maintenance over the years. So that's the expenditure to date. How much more we will spend, the intent and what's written in the contract is that once Mr. Endress takes title to the property, we wouldn't spend any more. Between now and then, it should be minimal. We're going to have some holding costs. We'll still have to, if a tree comes down, we'll have to maintain that. So I can't imagine we'd spend more than a couple of $1,000s prior to titling this to Mr. Endress if this were to go forward. Part of this is that we're putting the burden on Mr. Endress to spend the money on the extraordinary utility costs here. Again, kind of revisionist history, but when I look back at 2005, 2006, I don't think people understood the utility costs. There's this long strip of land getting to the property. The property, there were 2 houses on the property. I think there were probably some assumptions made about utilities there when it turned out that the homes were still on still on septic, I think. That's the only thing that would make sense to me, why there are no utilities going back to them. But again, so the extraordinary costs of making this a developable piece of land would be borne by Mr. Endress, and that's why it would be a dollar sale price. A couple of people had said originally the intent was 2 or 3 homes. Yep, when I go back and look at old meeting notices, that's what I see too, is that it was hoped that this would be a 2 to 3 home property. I hear that 5 homes feels like a lot. I will tell you that, the city has certain standards of a single family parcel has to be X number of square feet, has to be X width. If you approve this will have to go to the city council to deal with all of that in what's called a subdivision waiver. The lots here are all 45 feet or more in width, I believe. That's correct, I believe, 45 or more. When I read, and, Richfield is, if I had to guess, 20% of our lots are 40-footers. So it's not that uncommon for Richfield. This neighborhood has what looked to me to be probably 75-foot lots, so it is different than the neighborhood. But it's not something unheard of, certainly to have a 45-foot lot. There's a question about why the HRA isn't charging any kind of holding fees or requiring an option agreement or an exclusive rights agreement in which they pay us money. This is our standard practice. I know in the past we've had discussions of whether that's a good practice or not a good practice. That's for you to decide. I can tell you that we've never charged like holding costs or charged money for exclusive rights. In terms of privacy fences, this is, we do get into a bit of a timing catch-22 sometimes, in that Mr. Endress, has spent some money on the surveying and engineering and all those kinds of things. Any developer doesn't want to spend until they know they've got the project approved. And so we don't know, we haven't seen his landscaping plan. There will be a landscaping plan. There are certainly some areas here where I think there needs to be screening. There's the area where their driveway has kind of a turnaround and a dead end. Certainly there needs to be some extraordinary landscaping there to block headlight penetration into the neighborhood. There probably are some other key locations where landscaping makes sense. In the past, we've always been able to work those issues out after approval, but before construction. We will be continuing to hear from the neighborhood, if this were to move forward, and you will be as well. So we would continue to work with the neighborhood. I think that to put a perimeter landscaping fence around the entire property wouldn't make sense for a few reasons, but I think that there might be some, it might make sense to have more strategic fencing in places. And if there's some way we can build that into an approval, I'd be open to that. There are some things that are outside of my realm of expertise that are engineering related on storm sewer. I do feel certain, though, that the city engineer and and the engineering staff will pore over this, will, I see what they do in terms of the stormwater calculations. And it will be a better situation as a new development than it would be left alone, because the requirement is to capture the stormwater on site, whereas that hasn't been a requirement in the past. I think those were all the questions I really had an answer for.
Can I ask a question, please?
At this point, the public hearing is over, so
Well, I did ask a very specific question when I was up there.
about the cost or,
The exact figure about what it was gonna cost extra to do this project, not for the land, but for building the road, et cetera. et
okay,
cetera.
can you clarify that?
City gonna write a check for.
Yep, so the cost for building the road and the cost for doing the utilities to the HRA will be zero.
So the builder's going to pay
Yes.
for the road too. So once you sign the title, we're done. The city's done.
As
I said, I don't know when we'll close on the property with Mr. Endress, whether it will be September or December or January. We're still going to have to maintain the property from now until then. I cannot imagine us spending more than maybe $2,000 in the next 9 months. And that's if a tree were to fall down or something. If it's just us doing our normal maintenance, we'd maybe spend a couple of $100s in the next 9 months.
Are there any other comments or questions from commissioners? Commissioner Sandal?
My understanding is the developer is building the road, but once the road is built, that becomes a city road, and the city would then maintain it like it maintains your streets and any other streets.
That's correct. So the developer builds the road, builds the public utilities, dedicates the right-of-way to the city, then it becomes our road. And then, sure, after that point, we will spend money maintaining it like we do any road, plowing it. In 20 years, it will need to be seal coated. All of those costs will be there.
Are there additional comments or questions? Commissioner Sandal?
Can't really read it, and it's hard to read it on here. I'm just curious, because I'd not heard this phrase before. It talks about fire turnaround, and in parentheses, it says alternate to 120, I think it's foot, hammerhead, end of parentheses. Posted no parking, and it's at this little section, this diagonal. What's a hammerhead? Is that referring to this?
Yeah, that's referring, so I'll go up there and just point out what we're talking about. The concern is whether a fire truck can safely get in and out of the property. So you could do that either with a cul-de-sac, it would be a big cul-de-sac, or here, a fire rig could pull up, back, and pull back out again. So that's the hammerhead.
Thank you.
And I would say the fire chief has reviewed the plan and has given, his approval for this layout.
All right, are there okay, Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez?
Could you talk about, you said if this went to council, we would need to review a subdivision waiver. Can you explain that?
Yeah, again, there are minimum lot widths and square footages required. And so if somebody meets all of those, they don't need any subdivision waiver. In the case of new construction, and I don't have the zoning code here with me, I can't tell you the exact dimensions. There are some dimensions on the proposed lots that don't meet the city standards. It's very marginal. And so that's why they would have to go back to the city council and say, in this case, where the requirement is, X square feet, and we are 5% short on that, or it's X width, and we're 5% short on that. And I don't have the zoning code here with me, so I apologize.
Thank you. And then there was some questions about the property tax income or value of doing the homes versus selling it. I know we had talked about, I believe we talked about that in the last study session. Could you review that? Oh, let's see.
It's 5,000 in the packet.
Trying to pull it up.
Did you find that?
Yeah, so page 7 lists in our packet that the taxes payable in 2019 for approximate taxes collected from a home valued at $350,000 is $5,000.
Yep, thank you.
Per home.
The city portion?
It's,
That would be the aggregate.
The total.
Analysis of use of land. And then I'm trying to think of, I think those are the main questions I had.
Quick question, Chair.
Go ahead.
Would you like evaluations and opinions now, or you want to wait after the motion is
Well,
made?
why don't we make the motion and then we can talk about evaluations and opinions? And my question is when we're making the motion, do we need to put in about the landscaping and the headlights and all that stuff as part of the motion? Or,
Let me think of some wording while you discuss.
all right, so let's continue the discussion. Go
Could we
ahead.
not do the same thing we did at Chamberlain and for the strip mall on 66th Street, that it's, if not a mandate, a serious recommendation that homeowners have a place at the table in discussions about screening and everything else? They're part of the equation and they get their input. By no means do they have a veto, but they certainly need to be heard, and we've been very successful with getting the neighbors involved and making recommendations that have improved all our projects.
Yep.
And I think in this one, because it's so personal and much closer and much direct impact on those homeowners, that they need to be at the table.
Yeah, so the way we've done that in the past, and Commissioner Elliott's right, is the wording I think we did on the Chamberlain and on the Emmy and on several others was that you would approve this with the caveat that the executive director must give final approval to the landscaping plan. What that does, without that, the neighbors have to trust in the developer. This shifts that trust to me. And so, I take that role seriously, and we would work hard to do that.
Okay, and that would include like the concern about the headlights. I know, because that was a concern I had also with the driveway with the headlights, to make sure that we're having something to fix that problem.
Yep.
All right, so,
I will move, if you'd like.
all right, go ahead.
Okay, I will move that we approve and authorize execution of a contract for private development between the Housing and Redevelopment Authority and Endress Custom Homes, Inc. for the redevelopment of 6812 Emerson Lane, with the understanding that the executive director will be responsible for final approval of the landscaping plan, and that the neighbors, and I'm not sure how you'd want to say it, but the neighbors will be consulted in terms of landscaping, headlights, what were the other concerns?
Screening.
Privacy.
Privacy, screening, as the process proceeds.
And that's for 5 single-family homes under Richfield Rediscovered?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? All right, I'll second it so that we can have the discussion. So are there further comments or discussion? Commissioner Freeze Daniels?
I'm torn about this one. Mostly from a financial aspect. When I look at the 5,000 we've spent, in our packet, it says we've spent over $330,000. At 5,000, that's 66 years to pay ourselves back, and that's using all those taxes, right? And so that feels like a very long time to be selling something for $1. And if our holding costs to hold this and maintain it are we'll say $3,000 a year, if it's about $2,000 for 9 months. I wonder if there is a better opportunity down the road that can be 3 houses as Richfield continues to grow, that wouldn't require us to sell it for $1, is kind of where my head's at right now.
All right, are there other comments? Commissioner Elliott?
Yeah, I go back to what John said at the beginning, that we're not crazy about this. And we've heard the neighbors talk, and obviously they're not crazy about it either, and they're not against development. It's 5 homes on a relatively small piece of land, piece of property. And I guess I think back to what's happened over the past 12, 15 years in development here, and Mr. Endres has built a lot of very nice homes. And I walk by the 3 he's building on Oliver, once if not twice a day when I'm taking the dogs out and watch it progress and everything. And we had a similar situation with the neighbors coming in, being concerned, only wanting 2 homes and everything. It's different just in the sense when you've got it on a street that's open and not boxed in by a freeway wall and everything. It gives you more openness, and there's more sense of spaciousness. You're not getting any of that, I'll guarantee you, when these homes are done in there. And when I think about it, going back 15 years, I wasn't here, Commissioner Sandall wasn't, everything, but talking about 2 or 3 homes was set in everybody's mind. It's changed now because to make the price point, we need 5 homes. Mm-hmm. And to me, that almost reeks of desperation to get something done on that property, whether we like it or not. And from my perspective, Richfield's better than that. That's not how we do things. We don't jam things in there because we sat on it, we've invested money, and the only way we can make it work is put 5 homes on a piece of land that probably doesn't accommodate them. And so from my perspective, I'm against this project, and I voted for everything that Mr. Endres has done. This one, I can't vote for just because I walk the property and I look at it. And one of the things, when you talk about the engineers can't do anything on the neighboring yards and everything. If you stand on top where the 2 houses are on the north side, where the concrete pad is, there's about an 8 to 9 foot change in grade from when you're standing on the top down to the yard that's back there. And somebody's going to have to go in and engineer that, because you can have stormwater runoffs and everything, but I'll guarantee if you had a rain like today and that helmet was up there, that backyard is going to be flooded. And one of the niceties about land use and all that, and I don't do a lot of it, but I know if you change the contour or put something in that changes the flow of the water, and if it floods one house, then it's on the person that built the house on top. And in this particular situation, it probably is going to come back on the city because they're the ones that authorized it. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong with this just because of that change in grade, just that in and of itself. And our engineers can't go onto somebody else's property without approval and paying for it to try to figure out some way to keep that from flooding. So that's just one of the things that when you overcrowd it and put it on a piece of land that's boxed into that corner, that could come up in the future. And for that reason, we talked about it at length. And if you don't meet the price point, nobody's going to build on property, develop it at a loss. Nobody can do that. And so that's the reason we got 5 homes. And I certainly don't fault Dusty for needing to make a profit. He's got a family to support also. But I think that this particular project is beneath what I think Richfield aspires to and what they want to do in terms of the neighborhoods and building houses. So that's my take on it.
All right, Commissioner Sandall.
I'm not sure, maybe I'm confused about the numbers. What I looked at was the $330,000 acquisitions. And if we're selling and we have now got 5 lots that are each producing $5,000, that's $25,000 a year in taxes, whether it's for the city or the state or wherever. And in terms of recovery, it isn't 46 years, it's much less than that. It's like 12 or something, 13.
My math wrong.
Yeah, and so it's not like it's not forever going to be producing taxes. From my perspective, we've put in 5 houses on the site across from St. Richard's, those 5 townhomes that go along is that Sheridan?
Yes, Sharon.
Sheridan. And that was, I think, a smaller site than this. And it seems to work. I don't think that was inappropriate, and it worked, and now we have people living in homes that want to be there. I think it's, and a $350,000 house, in my mind, is a nice house. I mean, it's not a Cracker Jack house or Cracker Box house or whatever that's called. It's a good size 4-bedroom home with 3 baths. These are going to be nice homes with families who want to reside there and raise their families there. I think it's a plus to the community. Granted, in a perfect world, maybe we'd put in 4 or less, but this is what we're working with. And there is more land that continues. It may not belong to us, it belongs to the MnDOT, but there is more land. It's much broader visually than just looking at where the houses are sitting. As you walk up the road, there's land on either side. When you get up to the top and go, I didn't walk all the way back, but there's a path that actually leads down to 66th Street, or there was. So I don't think it's that crowded. I think it will be certainly less crowded than the homes we put on Sheridan. We're side by side. They had, these houses have land.
That's why they fit,
Well,
because they were attached.
yeah, I understand. I mean, that, I suppose, could be an alternative, but I suspect single-family homes are what's selling and what people want. So I'm supportive. I think it provides more housing for people who want to reside in Richfield, and I think once it's there, people will not be too concerned about it. But that's just my opinion.
All right, other thoughts?
My math was wrong, thank you. It was not multiplied by 5.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'm not great at math, but that one I caught.
So on the minimum lot sizes, I'm asking you to trust my memory because I don't have the zoning code here with me. My recollection is that the minimum lot square footage is 6,400. One of these lots as proposed is 6,000, so one of the 5 would be 6,000 as opposed to the required 6,400. And the minimum lot widths are 50. And we've got, it looks like 3 that do not meet that out of the 5. Those 3 are very deep. So in most cases, if there is a deep lot that can't meet the 50-foot width, that's usually approved. So that's, again, my recollection.
If I can comment on that?
Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair. My in-laws had a house on Garfield, and their lot was 40-foot wide, and it was on an alley, so I don't know what the depth of the lot, standard lot would be. It's probably 120.
130 is
130,
usually,
yeah, so it might have been 10 feet less, probably 120.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, and that fit in the neighborhood. I mean, it was, some lots were bigger, some were smaller, but, I mean, that's what we were building back in the 50s, 40s. So it's not totally, and you said there are a number of 40-foot lots in the city. There are.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And I was under the impression 6,000 was the minimum. Does that sound right?
I thought it was 60, it's either 6,000 or 6,400.
Okay.
I was thinking
6,000 was
6,400.
what I remembered, so.
All right, Commissioner Regan Gonzalez.
Director Stark, I have a question. So I know if the vote is yes, kind of what the process will be, but if the vote goes no, kind of what happens with the land, what's next, in terms of looking at that piece of HRA land?
Well, Madam Commissioner, it depends a little bit on how you frame a no, if that were the case. We could certainly keep attempting to get 3 or 4 houses done there. The issue with 4 houses are that they become economically infeasible for the developer. There's additional subsidy we could keep throwing at this that would make it feasible. And, that would be something you could consider in the future. If one of your answers could be no and quit coming back to us with this. We don't want to hear about it anymore. Or it could be no, but keep trying.
Chair, if I may, just following
go
off
ahead.
Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez's question, what happens on January 1st if he doesn't have 5 purchase agreements?
Well, one of two things would happen. I mean, the development agreement would become invalid. Usually, when this happens with redevelopment, big or small, we would come back to you and ask you, here are the circumstances in which the contract has become invalid. Would you want to consider modifying the agreement?
And I think my recollection when we were talking about options on property, that's the reason we talked about putting them on in the first place. So, if you're going to come back and we're going to renew, then we need to renew the option. So I don't know why they actually fell by the wayside, but this is related to some of the property over on the east side that sat there for 7 or 8 years, doing nothing and generating nothing. So was justification why we were talking about options in the first place. But I'm more concerned about you coming back and saying they didn't get done, they didn't get sold. He's got 3, what do you think? Or he's got 4. Do you want to start and then hope he sells the other one? So we're going to have that same quandary anyhow if in fact there's not 5 purchase agreements by January 1st, correct?
If there weren't,
Because it says there will be no close until he's got purchasers for all 5 lots. They won't, HRA will not close with him until that's written in I think, either in the contract or in the memo.
Yep. Yeah, so either he'll have to meet the requirements, or we would come back to you and talk about why that didn't happen and see if there's some alternate path forward you'd want to take or not.
Madam Chair,
All right, Commissioner Sandal?
I'm sorry, I keep raising my hand. It sounded like you know Mr. Andrus personally. You
I
called
don't.
him- Oh, you called him Dusty, I didn't.
Oh, I've met him,
Oh, okay, all right.
but I don't have a personal relationship.
Yeah, I have met him once at a prior house that he purchased. He bought a lot from a friend and turned it, tore down the old house and built a new one. And I was very impressed with how promptly and efficiently and well done it was done. I mean,
I don't think there's ever been any
yeah,
criticism
I mean,
of
I think he's done a good job in the city, and he's done at least 15 houses already, so.
All right, are there any other comments? Go ahead.
So there's been discussion about, envisioning this piece of land for other things, or Commissioner Elliott saying, looking into the future, we might be able to do better. I've heard concern from Commissioner Reese Daniels. I'm trying to wrap my head around tactically and logistically what that looks like, because there are real financial constraints. So what would that process of re-envisioning what we could do better looks like, I guess? Because if we know, there was 2 houses potentially proposed by the neighbors, but it wasn't financially feasible. What are other options we could consider? I guess that's where I'm struggling to understand.
If I know that in talking with the homeowners, that there's still some frustration, may not be the proper word, but some consideration that at least the first publication on an offer that came from the homeowners was $10,000, and then there was going to be a follow-up submission on proposal for the 2 homes and everything. I think that there's still a belief amongst the homeowners that they have the wherewithal and certainly the desire to perhaps purchase the entire parcel for somewhat much closer to what that we've got into it than the $1 that is going to get paid for the project. So that's one alternative. That's give them another shot at it, I guess is all I'm saying. And that's if it doesn't work, because there's nothing on the table right now or anything, because they're sitting, Mr. Andrews is sitting in the same position. He can't really move forward till he knows what the vote's going to be. At the same time, alternatives are hard to put together because time is an issue.
So, okay, go ahead, Commissioner Sandell.
I walked up there this morning because I was thinking I could drive, but they've got the street blocked off at the bottom, so I got out of my car and walked up there. And the site looks really untended. There's fallen trees and, I mean, there's like a tar walkway that actually kind of, or not a road, I think it was, that actually went around the property and back out again. And that's covered with moss and growth, and it was, I mean, it's like a jungle practically. I mean, it's very moist up there this morning. Very moist.
Should have been there before the meeting.
Yeah, yeah. And, but it just is an untended site and not very attractive. I mean, it's great if you want to let your kids go play kickball in the backyard or something, or up the hill, but, I mean, it really is not, it's an eyesore, in my opinion. So I think this is an improvement. I think it provides housing, which the city says we need and want to provide. And it's, in my mind, upscale housing, which is something that it's harder to do because it's so much more expensive.
Madam Chair,
Upscale for Richfield, not for Edina.
All right, go ahead.
just a couple of points. In terms of time constraints, our Public Works Department is planning to work on Emerson. I'm not sure if it's a seal coat, what it is next year. And so the ideal time to be tapping into Emerson would be before that work to occur. That's one of the time constraints. That's the only real time constraint I'm aware of. I know Mr. Endres is, doesn't know knows what the market looks like today, doesn't know what it's going to look like in a year or further out. And so, we've got a strong market. I think he would say for him, that's a time constraint.
Okay. I think it's going to be really important if we go forward with this, that we address all of the water runoff and all of those considerations to make sure that it truly, as it was stated at the open house, that everything's supposed to be flowing into the street and into the storm sewer systems. But we want to make sure that that is clearly looked at by the engineering staff and make sure that we are not creating a water situation that's a problem. I do think that that's important.
Yep.
Are there further comments, or do we wish to vote at this point?
Vote.
All right, well then I'm going to call, go ahead.
Do you have a comment, Commissioner?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I did. This is a project which could very well work, provide 5 homes for future Richfield residents or move-up residents. And it ties the property up until probably January. And so this is an opportunity that may not come back. He's already had a couple people in the past when he was looking to do it who couldn't wait. They bought other houses. And I think, from my perspective, I think it's an opportunity. It's a good one. It isn't perfect, but I don't think anything we do is ever perfect. But I think we can cover all of the concerns that the residents have legitimately raised as we go forward. And then at the end of January or whatever the deadline was in there, if he can't find buyers, then you can look at alternatives. That's kind of what my thinking is. So.
I agree. I'm willing to give it a shot to January, but there will be no extension vote from, I think giving it a shot is worth a try.
All right, if there are no further comments, I'm going to call the question. Mr. Endres?
Can I just clarify a couple things about the drainage and stuff?
Sure, that's fine. Come on up and state your name. You get 3 minutes to talk about drainage. And, well, grab the microphone, please, and state your name.
The green light should be on. There we go.
Okay, Dustin Endres, and I just wanted to just clarify what Mr. Elliott was talking about, that we might potentially make flooding worse in the backyards. Say, for instance, that the crown of that lot is right under where the houses are. the backyards would still drain as they have been draining forever. But then all of our runoff from the roofs will be taken into the street because we'll gutter all the houses, as we always do on all of our houses. And we'll take all that into the street, down the driveways, down the front yards, into the street, and into the storm drains there. So we won't ever be impacting the other homeowners in any way, and our engineering will be certain of that. And if there was an instance where the crown of that lot was further to the east, and we had to raise up the grade in the backyards and keep draining that way, then we would make a swale and go to the north and go into the street there. But, you know, we know that there are issues in those backyards there, and we don't want to impact that any. So, and as John had stated as well, that we're not overcrowding that area. We're above the minimum lot size on 4 of the 5. If we were to drop one of those houses off, it would be the one in the top left there, the northwest corner there. And, you know, if we drop that one off, what does it change? It doesn't really change anything. But what it does is it jacks the price of the houses up, you know, because we're trying to divide the cost of building that road and bringing in the sewer and water across the 5 lots. So that's the whole intention here. And then the cost of what we're coming up with for the lot value is just what we've been buying them from the HRA and from private sellers and things like that. And so that's what we're focused on with the costs, and that we want to maintain that cost so that these houses will comp out to our previous sales. We don't want them to be higher than our previous sales, especially along the freeway. And the freeway it actually might be worse than the houses in the max zone, because those are just airplanes ever so often, but this is kind of like a constant white noise. So, you know, we don't really want to push the values up even further. So, and originally when we started down this trek, we were looking at about $329,000 or $330,000 per house. That was as a private drive, but then we changed it into a public road. So now we're up to about $350,000 now. So, I think that was just the couple things I wanted to say. Sewer department, they won't allow any lift stations on any houses, unless you twist their arm and get them to do it on this, but they tell us that they won't allow any lift stations. That's about that, so. Okay, I just wanted to clarify those things.
All right, thank you. And that was like exactly 3 minutes. Like to the second. All right, at this point, we're going to take the vote. So all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
All right, so the motion has passed. Thank you for all your consideration, and thank you to all the neighbors. And we do want to make sure that we continue talking about the landscaping and the privacy and some of those types of things. Thank you.
May I make a comment to John?
Go ahead.
When you talk to the engineers or you talk to his engineer, remind them that certainty on runoff used to be predicated on 100-year rains. They're predicating on 1,000-year rains now because 100-year rains come about every month. So engineering on the runoffs is predictable only to the extent they know how much rain's going to fall in the future.
Well, my hope is that I can set up a meeting that the neighbors could be at and the engineering folks, because again, I'm not an expert
No.
on that, and I probably said more than I should know to say, so we'll get them hearing it from the people that
See, it's
know what they're
partially a
talking
bad
about.
habit you learned from me, I think.
All right, thank you. Moving on, we have the HRA discussion items. Are there any items that anyone wishes to bring?
If I may, just curious.
Go ahead.
Because I watch across 66th Street, what's the status of the development that's going on 2412 is the main property, West 66th Street, the apartment building that's going over right next to Fraser? Where's it at?
They have turned in their building permits for review. Based on the volume of work, building permit review is going slower than it has in the past.
That's a good thing.
They are hoping to get under construction in September.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other discussion items?
Is there going to be a home tour this year?
There is going to be a home tour, a remodeled home tour. Last year, we didn't get enough interested participants to make it really worth our while. This year, we have at least 3 that have indicated they'd be interested, and we're trying to reach out to see if we can get more. So that will be in October, on a Saturday in October. Hopefully not a Gopher home football game. We'll see.
Thank you.
Cool. Are there any other discussion items? All right, then we'll move on to the executive director's report. Mr. Stark?
Madam Chair, I really don't have much to report, but I'm going to pass along the construction update for the Chamberlain Apartments. I don't know who's on the mailing list for this and who's not. Apparently, I'm not. I got this from somebody else. But they're now leasing, and people will be able to move into Building A on September 1st.
Wow.
They're going to be getting their job site trailers off the site altogether within the next couple of weeks. And so it's going to really start looking more like an apartment community rather than a construction site pretty soon.
I was not in town when you guys got the tour. Is it possible to do one?
I want to go too.
I will look into that.
You
I
would?
missed it as well.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that'd be really nice.
Yeah.
Since it's built on top of my old house, I'd like to see it.
Yeah.
Well, at least the models will be open.
Yeah.
There ought to be
Oh, yeah,
something.
that would be, yeah.
Yeah,
that
but
would
we'll look at doing something
Yeah.
more formal so we can,
Okay,
just have to wander around at the site. And
okay, thank
All
you.
right, cool. Anything else for
No.
your report? All right, moving on to claims and payroll.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve claims and payroll. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved claims and payroll. Seeing that we have no further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you.